In today's video, we have some big news from the NHL waiver wire. We have yet another claim. We have several signings to discuss. Of course, we had the Seattle first ever NHL game last night. I want to discuss the results from that and much more. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news to talk about here today. First up, I just want to quickly touch on the Seattle Kraken playing their very first ever game in franchise history last night. It was quite a duel with the Vegas Golden Knights, of course, the NHL's most recent expansion team. It was certainly looking a little bit lopsided early on. I thought the first couple shifts by the Kraken were pretty solid, but then Vegas kind of took over. To me, Grubauer looked a little shaky on the first goal or two as well, especially the first one. The second one was a very nice goal from Marchessault, which ultimately, really, I don't think you could fault the goaltender on that one. But as time went on, they got better. They climbed their way all the way back, tied the game up, eventually lost. The Vegas Golden Knights pulled ahead by one on a somewhat controversial goal by Chandler Stevenson. Some think it's a kicking motion, some think it isn't. If it's a redirection off a skate, it clearly counts, but if it's called a distinct kicking motion, it does not. And I'm kind of personally thinking it does look like a kicking motion to me, but it's hard to say, distinct 100%. So I can understand why it counted, but not overly fond of those types of goals, but it's technically within the rules. Of course, Ryan Donato scores the first ever goal in Seattle Kraken history. Of course, Donato has bounced around, was a late signing by the Kraken, goes to training camp, makes the roster, gets a good opportunity, and scores the very first ever goal on the power play. So certainly, a big moment for him, something that'll go down in franchise history, something he'll be linked to when it comes to, future NHL trivia for a long time. Speaking of NHL trivia, I do have a question. Now that we've had the Kraken play their first ever game, who is the only player now in NHL history to score a goal against all 32 NHL franchises? I will wait a moment here. Put your responses in the comments, and then I'll let you know here in a second. But of course, I just want to see who knows this without looking anything up. You may have come across it. You may have seen other, articles or anything talking about it here today. But the very first player in NHL history to say they've scored a goal against all 32 NHL franchises is Golden Knights winger Max Pacioretty, who went on to score 2 goals last night. Of course, Pacioretty had scored even against Vegas when he was with Montreal, and counting his time between Vegas and Montreal, he had covered every other NHL team except for Seattle, and he potted 2 last night. So that's certainly another quick little trivia tidbit here for you today. Now on to other news. We have a waiver claim. The Vancouver Canucks have lost forward Zack MacEwen, who was claimed by the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, essentially, it looks like the Canucks were making room for the signing that we're going to talk about here next, which is Alex Chiasson, and MacEwen had to go through waivers, and it didn't work out. They were, unfortunately, lost him to Philly. I think he'll be a good fit in Philadelphia. Of course, Zack MacEwen is a Maritimer from Atlantic Canada here like myself. Never drafted in the NHL, 25 years old. Had a pretty decent junior career. Spent a fair bit of time with the Moncton Wildcats, which is not far from for me. I remember seeing him play a handful of times. Always thought he was pretty good. Got on with the Vancouver Canucks. Went through 3 seasons there. Was never like a huge star by any means, but obviously last year was the first year that he kind of stuck it out the whole season. And now this year they brought in some more players, more competition in camp, and essentially they were looking to keep some other bodies instead of him, and away he goes to Philadelphia. But certainly somebody who's not afraid to play physical, not afraid to drop the gloves. Got into a fair bit of playoff action with them in the past too, and we'll see how things work out for him with the Flyers. But given the the prototypical makeup of a Philadelphia Flyers player, I think he'll be a great fit there, and should be able to hopefully carve himself out a bottom 6 role that keeps him around. Like I said, a real hard-working player that hoping the opportunity works out for him. And of course, like I said, that was part and parcel due to the fact that they were signing Alex Chiasson, who was brought into camp on a professional tryout. He signs a 1-year deal finally with the Canucks. That's official on the books now, $750,000. So he will be on our roster. The Western Canadian tour of Alex Chiasson here continues after previous stints with the Edmonton Oilers, and before that with the Calgary Flames. Of course, before that with the Ottawa Senators. He certainly bounced around, started his career in Dallas, and then went to Ottawa, and then now he's doing the Western Canadian tour. So we'll see how things work out for him in Vancouver. Now, of course, we also had some other news on the waivers yesterday, because the Columbus Blue Jackets placed defenseman Mikko Lehtonen on waivers, but it was for unconditional waivers for the purpose of terminating the contract. Now, Mikko Lehtonen, like the same sort of thing that happened with Vitaly Kravtsov with the Rangers organization, was not part of the opening night roster, so he didn't make the team out of training camp. Was put through waivers for a purpose of being assigned to the minors. He was not claimed, and now he's refusing to report to the American Hockey League, to their Cleveland AHL affiliate. So that's obviously not good news. Obviously, Mikko Lehtonen came over to NHL from Europe after playing in Finland and as part of the KHL team, and it came over with a lot of fanfare. He was a top defenseman over there. The Maple Leafs signed him. I honestly thought, based on everything we'd seen and heard about his time in Europe, he would fit in nicely with the Leafs and be a solid member of their top six. Never really worked out. Didn't really see a whole lot of action there. And then, of course, midway through the season, ended up getting traded to Columbus. He did see some action there. And then kind of expected to make the team out of camp, and now he's unhappy, which... not, completely shocking. Some of these European players come over with the intention of being an NHL player, and it's a lot of them, like I said yesterday, talking about Kravtsov, from a financial standpoint, it's not always worth it for them to be a minor league player, but that's part of what you got to do sometimes to work your way up to being a regular NHL player to make the bigger money, right? So I understand they can make more money playing in the KHL or different European leagues over there, and that's all fine and dandy, but it doesn't mean you're going to be an NHL player immediately, and if you don't get what you want, you got to put in your time and work hard to get it. So I would think it's fair to say that the Mikko Lehtonen NHL experiment is pretty much over. That's 2 franchises now. His contract's been wiped out and terminated, and my guess is he likely heads back to Finland, probably rejoins the team over there and take part in the KHL. At least that would be my guess. I'd be surprised if another NHL team signs him to a one-way deal, immediately or anytime soon. And based on him being in his later 20s, I would think he probably doesn't make a return back, but you never know. The New York Islanders also confirmed a contract for Kiefer Bellows and Corey Schneider. Those are officially on the books now. Bellows gets a 1-year deal. Same with Schneider. Bellows gets $750,000. Schneider the same, but Schneider's American Hockey League salary is actually $500K, which ties him for the highest paid player at the American Hockey League. Due to the injury with Varlamov, Schneider will start the season on the opening night roster. Bellows is also on the opening night roster, mostly due to the fact that Matt Martin is injured. So we'll see what happens with these players, because to go to the American Hockey League, they would need waivers, and I don't think they want to do that. I think Schneider would probably clear, especially given the high American Hockey League salary that comes with it. So, but I don't think that's what they're worried too much about. I think they are concerned about losing Kiefer Bellows on waivers, like we've seen with some of these other younger players that have had it happen here in recent days, like MacEwen was today, Adam Brooks from the Leafs not long before that. And they don't want the same thing to happen. So hopefully he gets a chance to play and can prove himself. But as Martin comes back, somebody's going to have to come out of the lineup. And it could end up being Bellows. And we'll see what happens with his future. I would think the Islanders would try to trade him before they put him through waivers. But that's certainly another situation to watch. Also with the Islanders, Michael Del Cole did go through waivers and did clear. So he can now be assigned. And I believe he already has been to their AHL affiliate in Bridgeport here as well. On waivers today is the Seattle Kraken defenseman Dennis Cholowski, so we'll see what happens with his future. He very well could end up getting claimed or could end up getting assigned to the minors. We'll see tomorrow afternoon what happens with his future. We also have some other signings here to talk about as well. The Winnipeg Jets have finally made the official signing of signing former Red Wing forward Evgeny Svechnikov. So he gets a 1-year contract, league $750,000 at the NHL level. I believe it's a 2-way deal, so he will be paid less if he goes to the American Hockey League. Of course, the 2-way deal, for those of you who may not be aware, doesn't mean that they don't need waivers. A player's waiver eligibility is not determined by a 1-way or 2-way contract. It just gives the NHL team the ability to pay them a different salary depending on what league they are playing in. Obviously, they don't want to have to bury the full amount in the minors and pay a bigger salary. So oftentimes, they'll make NHL money one level, they'll get paid AHL level money at the other one, and then, but if they don't have that, if it's a one-way deal, they have to pay them the same amount regardless of where they are, and obviously sometimes can dictate what happens with their future. They want to give them more opportunity, more chances if they get to pay them the bigger bucks. Now, besides Evgeny Svechnikov, who should hopefully be a good fit with Winnipeg, we also saw signing today with the Edmonton Oilers. They signed Colton Sceivour. He gets a one-year deal, $750,000. Again, that's a two-way deal as well. So if he does ever get demoted, they'll be able to pay him a smaller American Hockey League salary. But he gets in there, should be able to be a fourth-line center for the Edmonton Oilers. Between he and Derek Ryan, who come over as newcomers this offseason, that should solidify them down the middle. They can either play McDavid with Draisaitl and put RNH as your number 2, and then have Ryan and Sceivour as 3-4, or they can move things around and put Draisaitl as the number 2 center, put RNH on the wing. Either way, it gives them more options. It gives them a lot more depth at the center position, and it gives them that. Because of that, though, they can play Draisaitl and McDavid together more frequently, and they're even more dangerous together than they are apart. So we'll see. It looks like the Oilers are going to open up here with McDavid, Draisaitl together, with Jesse Puljujarvi on the other side, and then Zach Hyman will be likely playing with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins on your second line, with Kyler Yamamoto. Another significant signing here today as well as the Nashville Predators have inked defenseman Mattias Ekholm to a 4-year contract extension. So there's another player we can likely remove from our trade bait board. Some players that we'll be following this year as likely being trade bait as the season goes along. As we've talked about before, Ekholm had made it clear he was quite happy to stay with Nashville, even though the team has been on a downward swing and likely heading towards more of a rebuild, in my opinion. That didn't seem to be overly concerning with him. He seemed to be content to sign an extension and stay and ride things out there. And we were a little bit surprised it hadn't happened as of yet. He was one of the top players mentioned last year going into towards the deadline as being a potential player getting a lot of attention, but then Nashville was picking things up, decided to hang on to him. They ended up making the playoffs, and then from there, they obviously protected a lot of defensemen in the expansion draft. They see a future with him, but this to me it's a lot of money. It's $6.25 million. There is no trade protection of any kind in his contract, so they can trade him down the road without having any blessing from himself. But still, based on the analytics experts out there, a lot of them don't like this contract so far and say it's not going to age well when he was playing with higher quality defensemen like Ryan Ellis, or even when PK Subban was there, because PK was at a much higher level when he was a Predator the first couple of years as well. When he had those two guys as partners, he was a lot stronger and didn't have to try to do as much because he had a much stronger partner. But playing him last year, like with Dante Fabro, for example, it really didn't go all that well. And a lot of his defensive metrics and analytics that are watched by the analytics people are not favorable. And they feel like this is something that the Predators should not have done, that they're clearly needed to go through more of a rebuild and signing another long-term extension when you already have guys like Duchesne and Ryan Johansson, etc. on longer-term contracts. Might have been a mistake, but at the end of the day, I still think he's a decent defenseman. Obviously, depending on who they're paired with, just like a forward and who they're playing with, it certainly will have an impact on their play. As the overall team quality of play goes down, your individual stats are going to be impacted as well. I know he appears to be a pretty good team guy, good leader. So we'll see where this goes. Fortunately, it's not super long, but 4 years, and like I said, the analytics people don't like it, but I'm not entirely convinced yet that it is bad. We'll have to watch it and see where things go, but he'll be staying with the Predators for some time. But typical David Poile style, there is no trade protection, so if a trade ever comes to be down the road, they won't have to worry too much about making that happen. So let me know what your thoughts are on all this news here today down below in the comment section. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around, and we'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.